All right. All right, everyone. Greetings, everyone. I'm Sonu Menakem. I'm on this Bhaskar, and I'm chair of the Youth Committee at Rotary of Sydney, and will be chairing this meeting today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered here today. I'm on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders, the past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present in this meeting. The Rotary Club of Sydney supports the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Welcome to our second Rotary Youth Talk. Rotary Youth Talks is a program to attract youth, Rotary alumni and scholars, as well as guest speakers with relevant backgrounds to share their experiences and insights on youth participation, capacity building, and broader engagement. Our leading question is, how do we cultivate youth leadership for a kinder and a better world? We will reflect on this during the course of our meeting today. We'll hear and be inspired from our guest speaker, Ms. Tori Berezowski, a cancer survivor and a University of Toronto graduate who will share her journey on pursuing education in anthropology and criminology, and then a move to Australia to do a PhD in forensic anthropology. We'll also have an opportunity to have a panel discussion later this evening. I also want to say that this is a safe space where all ideas from everywhere are welcome. So please feel free to participate and share your views through the question and answer chat function on the Zoom. Allow me to also extend a special welcome to our current and past presidents of Rotary Club of Sydney and our Honorary and Consul General, Luciano Concesing. So welcome, Consul General and fellow guests and Rotarians who are joining us today. And a special welcome to our guest, Ms. Dot Hennessy, who's a veteran Rotarian, but also the PCYC board member and a very passionate supporter of youth programs in the community. Welcome, Dot. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Deborah Hill, a fellow Rotarian, to introduce our guest speaker. Following the talk, we'll also have a roundtable discussion, so please stay tuned. Over to you, Deb.
Thank you, Sonu. Well, I don't know what it is about Canadians, but they sure produce some pretty wonderful people. We've got our own wonderful Kathy Tate, and it's such an honour to be able to introduce Tori Berezowski. And I'm going to quote my favourite singer and writer, another Canadian, Leonard Cohen, who in one of his songs said, "There's a crack in everything, but that's how the light gets in." And some people know how to make the most of the cracks that, you know, we all face in life and really run with it and use them to make their life richer and those of others around them. And Tori, from what I know about you, you've certainly done that as somebody who I think you say on your Instagram account, kicked the ass of cancer. You've certainly been able to show resilience and optimism, and gone on to do some amazing things already in a very short space of time. So Tori studied at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, the University of Toronto. She's a PhD student now in forensic anthropology at the University of Newcastle, where she also does some teaching. She's been a camp counsellor, an outreach volunteer, and so I really look forward to hearing her talk, and I'd love everyone to welcome her.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I feel like I have nothing else to say. That pretty much covers my entire life. But thank you. I'm really excited to be here. So yeah, I'm from Canada. It's been said a couple times, but I feel like the accent gives it away. I often forget that I have an accent until I talk to a bunch of Aussies and they're like, "Oh, you're from Canada, aren't you?" And then I'm like, "Wait, how do you know that?" And then I clue in that, duh, I have an accent. But I love it here. I absolutely love it here. it was a very long road to get here. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. It's a very long road to get here. Starting all the way back when I was 16, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Before that, though, I was a very, very active gymnast. I was training like 36 hours a week. I'm not even sure how I got school in. Like, in all honesty, I have no idea when I had time for school, because I was just always in the gym. And I was on the national team, did a lot of traveling, got to see all of Canada competing. And then one March break, in Canada, the kids get a week or two off in March. It's kind of like Easter break. I went to Peru and we did this whole mission trip. I got to hang out with a lot of really great kids, and we got to run some children's programs, and it was an incredible week. But when I got home, I got really, really sick. Because I had just come from a place like Peru, they just assumed that I had some sort of bug. So they didn't really think anything of it. I think I was down and out for about 2 weeks, and then kind of picked myself back up, went back to school, all was well. I was in year 10 at the time. I kept getting sicker. But because I obviously lived at home, my parents saw me each and every day. They never really saw the massive change. And it wasn't until 6 months later, after I got back from this trip, that I went to see my uncle. And the first thing he said was, "Wow, you look so sick. You need to go to the doctor." But it kind of caught me off guard, because I felt bad, but I didn't feel that bad. I feel like going through gymnastics, I had been through worse. So I didn't really do anything. But when I got home, my mom finally was like, "You know what, let's go to the doctor. You know, you've lost a bunch of weight. You look really sick now. Let's send you there." So we went to the Children's Hospital there. And like, huge shout out to the Children's Hospital in Toronto. It's an incredible, incredible place. And I remember all my symptoms were GI. So I had always had a stomach ache, couldn't keep on I kept losing weight, couldn't keep on any weight, couldn't keep in any food. So they gave me a colonoscopy and an endoscopy. And I don't know if any of you have had those. They're awful. But thankfully, because I was a kid, they put me out. But because they put me out, they had to give me a blood transfusion the day before, because my hemoglobin was really, really low. And they're like, "Well, we can't put you under with hemoglobin this low." So I had to get a blood transfusion. But when you get blood transfusions, you can't eat. So I didn't eat for a whole day. And then the next day I had the procedure, and you can't eat when you're having procedures. So I went 2 whole days without eating. But fun fact about me, I get very hangry, like unbearably hangry. So my poor mom had to deal with me for 2 whole days, not eating, being very uncomfortable, and just being poked and prodded and whatnot. They didn't find anything, but the doctor there said, "You know what, we'll send you for a chest x-ray. Should be fine." All I cared about was eating though. So I was like, "I don't care what you do. I want to eat." So they sent me through for the chest x-ray. Within 20 minutes, I was in the emergency room, and a doctor came in and blurted out that I had cancer. And it was all a very fast turnaround from thinking about this bagel that I was finally allowed to eat to, "No, actually, you have to stop eating because you have a procedure tomorrow and you have this life-threatening disease and your whole world stops right now." And I remember sitting there, and I don't remember much after they said those words. To be honest, I think I blacked out. And it wasn't until they left the room that my mom looked at me. She goes, did you get any of that? And I just cried. I just could not keep my emotions in, didn't understand a word that they said because I wasn't listening. I was done. But they admitted me that night. I was in the hospital for about a month. But a lot of that time, because I was doing all these tests and procedures, I wasn't allowed to eat. And it was awful because I was just so hungry for this whole month that I was in the hospital. And honestly, when I think back to my time in the hospital, that's the only thing I remember is being hungry. I don't remember much else. But I did all these tests. They found out that I had this mass in my chest, and they diagnosed me with stage 2B Hodgkin's lymphoma. I remember the first meeting with my oncologist. He goes, "Don't worry, you have the good cancer." And he laughs. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, good. I'm glad someone's laughing. I think after I left, I cried because I didn't realize, like, there's no good kind of cancer, obviously. But I did want to show you my x-ray. As a forensic anthropologist, I love x-rays. I'm hoping you can see that. The one on the left here is the cancer x-ray. And the one on the right is the healthy x-ray. Obviously, like, you can see the massive mass here. It was in my mediastinum, so it's the space between like your heart and your lungs, as far as I know. But it's very, very small. And my mass filled up that entire space. It was like 14 centimeters by 7 by 7. So it was very big. It all moved pretty quickly after that. They gave me a PICC line. So it's kind of like a more permanent IV in my arm. And they set me right on my treatment schedule. So I ended up getting 6 rounds of chemotherapy. The first round was so easy. And I remember thinking, wow, this is great. I can do this. And then the second round and everything after that was absolutely awful. At one point, I think, like, maybe after round 2, I wasn't able to walk anymore. I was too weak. I was in a wheelchair, lost all my hair. I actually did a fundraiser when I lost my hair, and I raised $10,000 for sick kids. So I was really proud of myself for that. I mean, if something awful has to happen to me, at least I can get something good out of it as well. And sick kids did, in fact, save my life. So it was something really that I'm really proud of. The first 4 rounds of chemotherapy were outpatient. So I had to go to the hospital. There were 21-day cycles, and I had to go to the hospital for 7 of those days. The last 2 rounds, though, were really tough because they were inpatient, and I got like 48 hours of constant chemo. And I feel like I've only watched a few movies about cancer because it honestly makes me cry. But none of them have really done it justice. Like, I wish I could describe, without sounding very dramatic, how awful the feeling of chemo is. Like, your insides feel like they're on the outside. I think that's the best way that I can describe it. Like, your whole body is just inside out. It's just wrong. So that was a really rough 6 months. But I do feel lucky in the sense that I was only on chemo for 6 months. I had friends who did 2 years of chemo. I have friends who have been doing chemo all their lives, and they're now 22. So I consider myself very lucky that I only had 6 months. I then had radiation. When I finished my 6 rounds of chemo, I was cancer-free, but they wanted to shrink the mass. So I did 1 round of radiation, which was me going to the hospital for 3 weeks. And radiation was so easy. I got to lie in this beanbag chair that was formed to my body. I put a snorkel mask on, like when you're swimming. And I had to hold my breath for like on and off for about a minute. And then they sent me home. So that was probably the easiest part of my journey. And it was probably a good thing that it was, because it was right at the end. And at the end of my last round of chemo, I was pretty broken. I was pretty discouraged. I thought I would never actually feel better. So the fact that radiation was much easier and I actually started to feel better was a kind of a nice way to end. silly me though, I thought, you know, once chemo ended and once radiation ended, all of this would be over. It's not. I'm 10 years, actually, I'm 11 years cancer, almost 11 years cancer free, 10 and a half, which is very exciting. But, you know, it's one thing to go through chemo and, you know, all the awful things. And I was a kid, so they just threw it all at me. They didn't really care about the long-term side effects. But now that I'm at that point of long-term side effects, I really wish someone had sat me down and really told me what the long-term side effects are. And of course, I feel like I sound a bit ungrateful saying that out loud, but I do wish someone had just prepared me for what life is like post-cancer. But in all honesty, I've been really blessed in this lifetime. I got 2 degrees at the University of Toronto. From going through chemo and cancer and stuff, I realized that I wanted to help people, but it made it very clear to me that I couldn't be a doctor. Like I couldn't be a medical doctor. I couldn't take care of living people. It's just too hard. I couldn't deal with that every day. And while I was on treatment, I watched a lot of TV and I watched a lot of Bones. And I was like, hey, that's really cool. And because I was 16 when I was going through treatment, I was pretty close to university age. I started looking at programs that, you know, had forensic science. I ended up going to the University of Toronto. I got my undergraduate degree and my master's degree there, both in forensic anthropology. And then when I graduated my master's, when I graduated my undergrad, I was like, nope, I'm done school. I'm getting a job. This is done. And then I was like, actually, I could do one more degree. It's okay. And then when I finished my master's, I was like, nope, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I hate school. And now here I am, still in school. But honestly, I love it. I absolutely love what I'm learning. To get to Australia was a bit tricky. Just because I'm an international student and I had to find funding and apply for all these visas and scholarships and stuff. But I think it was 2 years, maybe a year and a half of a lot of hard work, especially on Xanthi's part. She's here in this meeting. Bless her, I would not be here without her. But we worked really hard together to get me here. And yeah, now I'm doing my PhD. I'm almost 2 years in, actually, which surprised me the other day when I thought about it. So almost halfway done. What my project is looking at, so when someone gets murdered, a really good way to dispose of your victim is by burying them because they're really difficult to find. My research is looking at testing different techniques to find them. So I've worked with, he's a geographic profiler, and he uses environmental, spatial, geographic, and behavioral cues to track potential body deposition sites, so to find potential grave sites. So I'm working with him, and I'm also working with a geophysical scientist. So I'm using a couple techniques, geophysical techniques that can directly detect graves. Now, how they work, if you think of like sonar in the water, how they send out sound waves, and by the time it comes back, that time will tell you the distance of objects. It's essentially like that, is just using different types of energy waves. But these techniques can map the subsurface. So I've actually dug my own graves at a body farm in Sydney, pig burials. So I can now test over the period of a year how detectable they are with these techniques. And I'm loving it. I'm learning a lot. I'm teaching on top of all of that. And teaching is probably my favorite part. Don't tell the school that. But I do love to teach. I love to see that light bulb moment in those kids. I guess they're adults, in the students. This semester has been particularly hard because we've been online the whole time and I haven't been able to see anyone, but I do love it. And I'm so, so, so thankful for the opportunities that I have to be here. That's me.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Tori, for sharing the journey. And I'm sure that one of the other Canadian spirits in this meeting would be taking home of this positive, all that you shared back to Canada and whispering those spirit back in the country. So welcome, Tori. And we now will have a roundtable discussion, everyone, where we shall explore the challenges and the opportunities that come through resilience and perseverance. And Tori is a testimony to what can be achieved with this. So Tori, if I could start with opening statement, I think you touched base on an experience of cancer, and you said at one point of time that, you know, the inside felt like the outside. And I think it tells you that cancer survivors carry scars inside and outside the body. And I think it takes a lot of courage and advocacy for those navigating those scars. So we'll touch base on really challenging those scars, which are not sometimes physical, but also emotional. So Tori, can you tell us and the audience a little bit about what is Hodgkin's lymphoma for those who don't come from medical background? And Tori, over to you.
It's a blood cancer like leukemia. Mine was a non-tumorous mass. And in all honesty, I have no idea what the mass was made up of, but it's in the same category as leukemia. There are two types of Hodgkin's lymphoma. There's Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's. Non-Hodgkin's grows a lot faster. Hodgkin's is very slow growing. You can have the tumors for years, or masses for years. And it does have a very high success rate, which is excellent. Hodgkin's more so than non-Hodgkin's. And it specifically targets, I think I was told it's young kids like 16 to 20, and then older adults like 45 plus is kind of the target range. So it wasn't uncommon at my age to be diagnosed with something like that.
Thank you, Tori. And so just to go deeper into this question, how did you feel when you were diagnosed at first? And how was it initially detected? And what was your experience? And was it a shock? And of course it was a shock. And you shared your experience with the doctor, and you came out of the consulting room, and you cried. Can you share with us what was your experience when when was the diagnosis made?
这边也可以走，但是这边比较有意思，好不好？
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Yeah.
It was bewildering, honestly. I remember I had gone for a few tests before I was officially diagnosed, and I had a trainee doctor sit with me just doing the regular intake questions. And she said, "What do you think it is?" Or she said, "What are you worried about it being?" And I said, "Well, I don't want it to be cancer." And bless her sweet soul was like, "Oh, don't worry, it's not." And I mean, she had no idea at the time. And, it's one of those things that it doesn't happen to you until it happens to you. You're like, "Oh, that can't happen to me. That only happens to people I don't know," right? Even though cancer is really prevalent statistics wise, not a lot of people know people that have been affected by it, unless it's, grandparents usually. If you have someone in the family with cancer, it's your grandparents, because when I was young, cancer was an old person disease. So when I was diagnosed, it was like, what? How can I, me, young athlete, get something like that? And it took a lot to wrap my head around it. And I remember that first month that I was in the hospital, I was in denial half the time. I was like, kept asking my mom if I could go home. I wanted this bad dream to end. And you know, it finally kicked in when I started chemo, but yeah, it was a weird thing to be told as a young, fit 16-year-old.
Thank you, Tori, for sharing that. Well, just a question from the floor from Deborah Hill, and she asks about what are the support networks that you have had and that you experienced was really critical in your recovery?
So Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, Sick Kids, they partner with this cancer camp, essentially. It's called Camp Uchigayas, and it's a camp for kids with cancer, mainly. So they have in-hospital programs. So if you're a cancer patient going through active treatment and you can't leave the hospital, they have programs that you can do. So you can like do arts and crafts, you can play games. They have a whole room set aside for Camp Uchigayas. But they also have a summer camp facility like up north. I don't really know how to explain it because you guys here don't really cottage, but in Ontario, in the summer, you always go to a cottage, and we have something called cottage country that like people love to go to in the summer. So this camp was in what I would call cottage country. So you could swim, you could rock climb, you could do all this stuff. And that was available to kids with cancer. You could be actively like on treatment. You could actually get treatment on site, which was very cool. But once you were like cancer free, you could still go until you turned 18. So if you got cancer at 6 years old, you could go to this summer camp until you were 18 kind of thing. And I met some of my absolute best friends at this camp because no one really gets cancer unless you've gone through it. Like we would stay up all night talking about, oh, I had that procedure. Oh, I had that medication. That was awful. Oh yeah, that happened to me. And I mean, it's one thing to sit and talk to your regular friends about it, but I feel like you very often get like the pity stare, like that, oh, that must have been tough. But when you're with your cancer friends, they're like right there with you. They know exactly how you feel, and you just don't get that pity. So that was a huge program for me. And then they also have something called YAC, which is Young Adult Cancer Canada. And that is a program for adults, so 18 to 39, I think, that they have retreats and online programs and support and Facebook groups, and you can it's a great community to be a part of. Anytime I have like a cancer worry, I'll post in that group just to, have that sounding board to people who understand. So I've been very lucky in the support that I've gotten post-cancer.
Thank you, Tori. And I see there's a question from the floor. Kathy, if you could unmute yourself, and Kathy, over to you.
Hi, Tori. Congratulations on everything that you've accomplished. And I had to laugh when you said, I guess it was your uncle, oh, you have the good kind of cancer. So I'm a cancer survivor, and I had the same thing said to me. Oh, you have the good kind of cancer. It was thyroid cancer, and it was a surprise and what have you. But I know what I went through, after all the procedures and the operations, etc. And what it did for me is it almost gave me a reset in my life. So I'm sort of curious, what was your reset and what was the motivation behind that?
Great question. First of all, congratulations. That's amazing. I think it was a reset for me too, and it put my life into perspective. I was never because I had the good kind, I wasn't ever really afraid that I would truly die, but I grappled with the fact that I had a life-threatening disease. And I guess I still have that moment of clarity every time I feel upset about something, every time I feel like my life isn't going anywhere or I'm sad, I get that little kick. I think back to, I was here. Like, I was at the lowest of lows and I was given a second chance. And it's not until now, being 10 years out of it, that I truly realize how lucky I am and how lucky I was. And I do think, like, I think a lot of it wasn't until 10 years that I really realized that reset, like, it was a reset for me. And I felt lucky that I had another chance, but it's not until these last couple of years that I've actually realized how my life had reset. So it took a bit of time, but reflecting back and considering I'm here now, I can absolutely see, like, it was like a retrospective moment of, wow, I did it.
Wow, Tori, I'll be honest with you. I was educated today that one of my friends have had a thyroid cancer, and it tells you that we all have our lived experiences, and those lived experiences do inform and bring us together, if not apart. So thank you, Tori, and thank you, Kathy, for sharing that. I think audience have loved your experiences and would get inspired from it. Tori, just to complement Kathy's question, and as you know, survivors find refuge in different aspects of rehabilitation. Some find aspects such as family and spirituality. Have you had a moment where you found that that the family and you probably a spiritual calling was really played an important role in your recovery?
My family played a massive role in my recovery, and my kind of community around them. I grew up in a Christian church, so we've always had a lot of friends around. I moved when I was quite young away from my actual blood family, but my parents made friends and we found they were sort of like family. And they really, really pushed me through it. My own core family, definitely. We actually became a lot closer. Like this, I find I've talked to friends where cancer has ripped their family apart. And I was on the opposite end of that, where it actually brought us closer. So I'm very lucky to have them. But also all of my parents' friends, like, they really, really stepped in. They gave us food. They gave us like tickets to take the GO train or the train into town every day. They gave us parking passes. They gave us hotel stays, like anything that they could help with that would be useful for me, they did. And I was floored by their generosity. And I've had a lot of friends who went through cancer and that didn't have that support system. And again, it's one of those moments where I just felt so blessed. Like, even though I went through this awful, awful thing, I was lucky enough to go through it in the best possible way.
Thank you, Tori. And I just want to, really look at the social aspects of the cancer and some of the topical questions, which is really on the hot topic in New South Wales. As you know, there's a bill right in the New South Wales Parliament about cancer survivors and the right to death and so on and so forth. And there is a very philosophical and ethical question around the provision of palliative care for patients. And many, as you would argue, that many of the physicians are fighting that, more provision for palliative care. And it has shown that some of the experiences inform that the patients who are provided palliative care are more likely to choose that aspect of care. What are your thoughts on this, Tori?
I'm for it. I think people should be able to choose how they want to go and when they want to go. My best friend passed away 2 years ago from glioblastoma. And he had originally signed, in Canada, it's called MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. He had signed that a year before his kind of decline. However, stuff got in the way and he ended up not being able to go through, and, you know, he had to waste away, for lack of a better word. And we watched him waste away, and it was awful on him. It was awful on us. And I truly, truly believe that people deserve to choose how they die. And until you're in that position, I don't think you fully understand the gravity of it. Like, I understand the arguments against, you know, not letting it happen. I get it. But until you're in that position, it is really hard to grasp. And I am absolutely all for it.
Only the ethical point there, Tori, is that the repercussions of this in the developing world, where you know, the provision and the rigors might not be appropriately provided to the patient, and consent, so on and so forth. So there are concerns which I think needs to be deliberated upon. But thank you for sharing your thought. I see that there's another question from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, if you could unmute yourself and ask the question.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I suppose, wanted to start off by saying thank you for sharing. I definitely know how difficult that is. I was interested actually in when you spoke about the long-term effects. So you spoke about having that support network and how that was great for you, but you've also spoken now about the long-term effects. I was wondering if you can or want to share more about that. And I think, as a kind of aside, I'm also I've got a long-term illness, which I was diagnosed as a child. So I completely understand from that point of view. And I also work in mental health. So I was wondering if there's a link between the support you get when you're a child dealing with physical illnesses, because I remember it was always the focus on getting physically better. There was not much focus on the mental health. And I think long term, at least for me, that definitely is just as important. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the mental health part, because now that's fresh in my mind. I feel like the mental health, and it kind of ties into the long-term effects. I didn't have a lot of the mental health side effects until later on. I think because immediately post cancer, I was happy. I was, you know, like, just felt so lucky, and nothing could happen to me now. I was bulletproof because I beat cancer, or I survived cancer. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that, when they started to discharge me a bit from the hospital and I started not seeing my doctors as much, that mental health aspect really started to creep in. You know, I'd get a cough. Oh my gosh, am I sick? I'd, you know, get a lump. Oh my goodness, like, I have to go to the hospital right now. And that's actually something that I struggle with now. I am not very good at being sick, because I've experienced the worst. So my mind automatically goes to that. But I do think that having a good support network going through it definitely, it doesn't prepare you, but it kind of gives you padding. So when I started experiencing those mental health issues, I had a good community to fall back on. And I have a lot of friends who didn't have that community, and they're struggling what seems to be a lot more than I am. Obviously, you can't rank people's struggles, but I think the community aspect plays such a big part in it, because who do they have to turn to? right? As for these other side effects, I'm at risk now of getting breast cancer early on, heart disease, liver disease. I think that's it. I'm most worried about breast cancer, honestly. That one, terrified of always. Like I already get bi-yearly scan twice a year, just to make sure I don't have it. And yeah, like I said before, obviously I'm grateful that they saved my life, you know, like just pump me with whatever, make it go away, make me healthy again. And maybe, honestly, they probably did tell me the side effects and I just blacked out and didn't hear it. But I wish someone had sat me down even at 18, you know, even when I turned like adult age and said, these are the things that we need to test for. These are the things we need to look out for, and just prepare me more, because it's stressful a lot of the time, especially when like I have a new symptom or a reoccurring symptom and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I mean, now my doctor's all the way back home. I don't have an oncologist here. I can't afford an oncologist here. So it's, yeah, I wish they had sat me down and just really laid it all out and said, this is what could happen and this is what you need to look out for.
Really, really poignant, Tori. And I'm reminded that there's another question from Dot. Dot, if you could unmute yourself and please ask the question.
Thank you so much, Sonu. And Tori, what a brave young woman you are and what a remarkable journey. I'm also a cancer survivor.
Woohoo!
Yeah. And I think your story is so positive and so true to the emotions that you have from diagnosis and being told. And as you go on that journey, no doubt you selectively hear what you're being told, and you have to have that support with you to say what you were really told. And when I had my cancer, which is over 38 years, nearly 40 years ago now, and to your attitude and your perspective is everything. So to me, every day I have is so special, and I make every day count. Please do that like you're doing. Stay on the journey. Don't any road humps, embrace them, manage them. But the positivity is what brings you through. And if you look at my life, has been remarkable. And I think being a cancer survivor has given me that strength and passion, beat it, and to be there for others. So you always know there's others with you. But wonderful story, and yeah, and truly just say how proud you should be of yourself and take care. Thanks for sharing with us. It's so special.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I will take your advice.
Thank you. Thank you, Dot. And Martin Seligman, who is one of the fathers of positive psychology, I think he has really we can take so much leaf out of the lives of some of you who are the cancer survivors, but also inspire people in the community of how to live and where to take the journey forward despite the challenges that we encounter in lives. So thank you, three of you. And I really want to acknowledge our guest speaker today, but also Kathy Tate and Dot Hennessy for your sharing your journey of cancer and how to navigate that. And thank you, Tori, for sharing yours. Just before we close this and I hand it over to my dear friend, Karen Lobley, Tori, can I ask you, what is the message that you'd like to give to the community who are probably, many of them are struggling with a chronic disease. Cancer is one of them, heart disease, stroke, so on and so forth. What is your message to the community? Tori, over to you.
Oh, what is my message? Honestly, I would stick to what gives you passion. And if you're not passionate about it, if you're not enjoying it, don't do it. Life is too short to do things we don't want to do. And obviously, you know, things happen and you have to, you know, take that job to make that money. But long-term, work towards happy and work towards passion and, you know, build a life for yourself that you don't need a break from. You actively want to be in. And, you know, sometimes it does take a life-threatening disease to really see how much of a blessing life is, but just do what makes you feel passionate.
Beautiful, beautiful words, those, Tori. And I also just want to acknowledge our past president, Fatima Ali, who's joined us today. And I know that as a survivor of a chronic disease, she's echoing your words and sentiments. So thank you to you all survivors of chronic and cancer for sharing your journey today. Can I now invite a dear friend and Rotarian, Karen Lobley, AM, to give a vote of thanks. Karen, over to you.
You plugged me too well, Sonu. Tori, it's amazing to listen to you. I know Sonu and many of the people on the call know that I adore young people. I don't still want to be one because life has been good to me and I'm having a lot of fun now. A few things that you said really resonated. I do a lot of work with organisations that work with highly disadvantaged young people who have had a bad start in life through no fault of their own. It comes in many disguises, and you have also had one of those in different ways. So one of the things I read recently, which really resonated with me, is that somebody said you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. That went up on my wall when I saw it, because that's really such a positive view that you don't look back, you look forwards. One of the other things I think a young lady like you is to everybody, and particularly young people, where they say you can't be what you can't see. If people don't see role models like you, they feel that there is nothing for them. But if young people who have had a difficult time can see someone like you and hear from someone like you, then they also understand that they can achieve things. And the last thing just popped into my head because you mentioned it about passion and about doing what you love doing, was one of the speakers to the club some time back. I asked him how he got to where he was, because he was the head of a big organisation, but he'd had a roundabout way to get there. And he said one of his teachers said, find something you love so much that you'll do it for nothing, and then do it so well that someone will pay you for it. And I really like that. And that's kind of your way of looking at things. I've always said, just do something. You've got to, I'm an old lady. I'm like Dot. I wake up every morning and I love what I do. I just can't wait to get to do more things. And I don't think I'm going to lose that. It's probably going to get worse because I'm closer to the end of life. So I'm going to, do more and more and more. So thank you very much for your presentation. It's awe-inspiring, and I congratulate you for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful words, Karen. And I think if there was a provision, we could declare everyone at Young at Heart. I think all of us, the Young at Heart, all of us will bring everyone together. So thank you, everyone. On that note, I just want to make some few announcements. As you know, the Rotary Club of Sydney is doing the spring appeal at the Redfern, and a dear friend, Kathy Tate and Dr. Thelma Raman is looking for volunteers to go out there and on the PCYC Redfern. If you have got even 4 hours in your day, please reach out to them, and your time will be deeply valuable. These are the most vulnerable communities in Redfern, and your support and your volunteering spirit will make a lot of difference in the community. So please reach out, as I said. On that note, I want to thank again our guest speaker, Tori Berezowski, for sharing her passion and journey with us. A big thanks to all the guests and Rotarians who joined us today. A special thanks to 3 amazing women who shared their journey with us today as well. I want to leave you with some messages and some my commentary on the chronic diseases. As you know, that non-communicable diseases, including stroke, cancer, they're one of the world's leading causes of mortality. Now, 77% of non-communicable diseases are actually, the death because of these days actually in the lower and middle income countries, the poorest of the countries, and it hits the lowest of the socioeconomic classes the most. So it's important that some of the preventable measures, such as reducing tobacco use, physical activity, and alcohol abuse, so on and so forth, can break a dramatic changes in terms of public health approaches to limit the impact of non-communicable diseases. So if you are going out there in the community, and if you can convince a person to stop smoking, you're making a huge difference to the burden of cancer, to the burden of chronic diseases. And also, if we may also remind that there is a lot of stigma around the chronic diseases. And those stigma is because of the poverty. And the poverty is inextricably linked with non-communicable diseases. Many in several countries where people can't afford the better and the optimal healthcare, they carry the burden and they don't get the treatment. We in Australia and Canada, people are fortunate to access the best of cancer care. But many in the communities in the developing world, people don't have access to chemotherapy and radiation therapy. So it's all important that equitable care should reach one and all. And it's important that we think about those communities who are doesn't have the access to the best and optimal care. On that note, I want to leave you with these words from the Gregory Williams, a great philosopher. And he said, on the other side of a storm is the strength that comes from having navigated through it. Raise your sail and begin. Raise your sail and begin. It's a story of resilience. And I want to thank you all, and Tori especially, Rotarians and fellow guests, for all your support to Rotary Youth Talks. On that note, I declare the meeting adjourned, and the floor will be open for fellowship and friendship. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you